Thank you for joining us there to celebrate Pride Month. We have a great panel of leaders and a moderator who will facilitate an impactful discussion as part of the HACER June webinar series, Beyond Pride, Intersectionality, and Belonging. On behalf of HACER and the team at HACER, we want to extend a thank you to our webinar sponsors, PepsiCo and Target. Now let's begin. I want to introduce to you our moderator, AJ De Leon, co-founder and CEO of Innovare. AJ is the co-founder and CEO of Innovare, Social Innovation Partners, a data and continuous improvement edtech venture that supports education and nonprofit leaders with the software support they need to impact students and communities. His professional experience includes roles focusing on youth development, teaching, staff development, post-secondary access, program management, strategic planning, big data, and now social entrepreneurship. The venture he leads is currently growing across the US and Latin America, and equity focused since day one. AJ attended the University of Michigan, DePaul, and Duke University in computer engineering, education, and the social sciences, respectively. He's an inaugural alumnus of the Surge Institute Fellowship, a national top 10 EPIC alumnus of Education Pioneers, and also an alumnus of the K-12 Lean Lab Fellowship, the Start Ed and NYU Steinhardt Ed Tech Accelerator, 1871, and the IHCC's Latinx Tech Incubator, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I introduce to you, AJ De Leon.
Gracias, Alberto. So nice to see you, and so nice to see everyone who's here with us in community to celebrate our community and the diversity of it. And it's great to be with you all. As Alberto mentioned, I'm AJ, and currently saying hello to you from New Orleans. Just came back from London yesterday, where I spoke at Tech Week. So it's just great to be in community with all of you and to get us all started. How about I introduce you to my fellow panelists? And I'll pass it over first to Jasmine. Jasmine, do you mind telling us your name, your company, your pronouns, how you identify, and of course, give us a little blurb about who you are?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, AJ, and thank you, Farsa, for the invitation. My name is Jasmine Garcia, and I identify as a queer Mexican-American woman. I am currently at LinkedIn after spending about 8 years at nonprofits. So really happy with my role here because I actually work directly with nonprofits and help them maximize their solutions on LinkedIn for hiring or learning and development. And I believe that's it, right, AJ? Yeah.
Thank you, Jasmine. So, Carlos, how about you? Would you like to join us on this call and tell us your name, your role, and your pronouns?
Yeah, absolutely. Buenas tardes a todos. My name is Carlos Butler Valle. My pronouns are he, him, and él. I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Constellation Brands. We're probably better known for some of our products like Modelo and Corona, Pacifico, and Victoria, among our beer portfolio. I live in Chicago. I identify as a cisgender homosexual male. I'm originally from Puerto Rico. And I live in the suburbs of Chicago with my husband and our beautiful daughter, which is right up there. We took a picture of her when she was 9 years old, and she's just a sleepy little bear. So if you hear her either crying or shrieking of joy, I apologize in advance, but the joys of working from home.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Carlos. And we definitely have to hit you up after this webinar with some of those brands that you mentioned.
Absolutely. Please
Although
do.
I do have my Pepsi because, we had to.
Yeah. And buy Pepsi too. Absolutely. If you're looking for something non-alcoholic, yes.
Right. And Jasmine, you want to check just she, her, right? Okay, perfect. Thank you. I know it was a lot of things to keep track of. Anthony, are you there? Knock, knock.
Yes, I am here. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me join today. My name is Anthony Almanzar. I am Dominicano. I work for State Street Global Advisor, and it's basically the asset management arm for the State Street Corporation, which is a financial services company. I've been working here for about 6 years now, and I am a vice president in the IT department, and I manage a program for business growth. Other than that, I identify myself as a CIS male, gay, and I don't use pronouns. I still get confused when people add them. I don't know what they mean, and I apologize for the lack of knowledge on this, pronouns movement. I think the name gives it away that I'm a he. So thank you for having me, and thank you to Hasser for inviting me over. Oh, one last thing I forgot to mention: I am also part of the Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers for the Hasser program this year. So I'm a proud YACAer, and I'm looking forward to have a great conversation with everyone here.
Thank you, Anthony. And no need to apologize for sure. We're all in different places and we just want to be inclusive and identify folks as they would like to be identified. But we're all on the spectrum, and some of us, as you said, have, prioritize talking about pronouns. Others we're still in that movement, right, to understand more. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the diversity, right, that all of us represent, not just as LGBTQIA and every other letter you want to add, right, but or take away, but also who we are as people and who we are inside, right. And first, I want to tell you, I'm very, very proud of all of you for what you've done. I know it's not easy to be a visible queer or LGBTQ plus person in business and tech and any situation. So I'm just happy to be in community with all of you, and I hope to connect with you on LinkedIn and after this, and we can be friends in real life, IRL, right? Post pandemic. But first, let's get a little bit of history, on who you are. So tell us a little bit about your journey of visibility, like coming out. What was that experience like when you sort of discover yourself and we're ready to share that type, of sort of that had that trust to be able to be authentic, with other people. Can you give us a little bit of your sort of queer genesis story, so to speak? When did that happen for each of you? Carlos, you want to get us started?
I can. It's interesting. I think growing up in a Puerto Rican household, it was always a taboo topic to talk about, homosexuality. And I feel like I definitely, like I was a kid, and I could feel that there was something sort of different about me, and I think others around me sort of knew. But for a long time, I think we sort of live our life thinking that, and it's part of our sort of Latino, I think, narrative, which is like to go along to get along. And so for a long time, I felt like I had to kind of hide my identity so that I could make peace, like keep the peace. And I was actually outed. And at that moment, it was not a good feeling. And there were a lot of just a series of things that sort of happened. And, it coming out is such an important thing that it was difficult for me for a long time to think that someone felt that they could sort of do that for me.
Wow.
But, you also know that you sort of have to roll with the punches. And I think for me, I took that as an opportunity to sort of to be empowered. And so, I had to deal with a lot of the same, I think, at least for our generation, a lot of the same sort of misconceptions about what homosexuality was. And, my mom thought I was going to just live a life of despair and, and debauchery and, just like a lost soul. And, part of that, I think, I think in that moment, I had to say to myself, like, I've got to be stronger so that I can show that there's a different way. And I don't take a lot of stock in it, but, thankfully have a lot of folks around me who say that they're grateful that there are folks in positions of leadership like me who look like them, who are able to open those doors. Once I finally, it's interesting, like once I was out of the closet, I felt like from that moment forward, there was a liberation for me. And I felt like I will say there's a privilege that I have of living in a city like Chicago and having lived in Washington, D.C., where you've got these major metropolitan areas where there's a lot more acceptance. And so I didn't want to waste that. So for me, I sort of made the choice at the outset to just come out at work, and I've never looked back. And so But I'm happy to see that there are more and more places where people are starting to feel comfortable and confident. And I'm thankful for all the people before me who helped open those doors.
That's right. Thank you, Carlos, for sharing that. And,
Sure.
if you relate to Carlos's story, put that in the chat. We want to hear from you. If you, understand what it's like to be, Puerto Rican, what it's like to have assumptions made about you, or what life would be after you came out, right? It is a little bit of debauchery. It is a little bit of, distress, right? But it's not all of that all the time, and it's a little bit of everything. So I think your mom wasn't fully like off target, but you know how it is. But I think I understand exactly.
Yeah, but she doesn't know that. Yeah,
I know.
that's
Yeah,
she
my
doesn't
mom
know.
also, she
Yeah.
thought the same thing. Like, oh my God, because I think they just love us, and they fear that people won't, will make our lives hard, right? And that's why the fear is, I think, for some parents. I know that was for me too. Jasmine, how about you? Tell us a little bit about when you came out, or when you learned you were different, or who you really are.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think for me, so I graduated college in 2015. I also moved away from home, California, to DC for 4 years in 2015, and that is also when I came out. And I can tell you, it was definitely a very interesting journey. Like, thankfully, my family, like, it was fine. My mom, I'll never forget when I called her and I told her, and she's like, "Why are you crying?" And I'm like, "Well, because, it's, whatever." And she's like, "No, it's fine." She's like, "If you're happy, I'm happy. Like, whatever." And I will say, I mean, it's been an adjustment just in terms of, I think, growing up in a very traditional Mexican household in terms of the language, right? That was the adjustment and kind of like the learning journey and so on and so forth. But I mean, my family is amazing. I think when it comes to work, though, I unfortunately have experienced working at organizations where I did not feel safe, although I was out. And I recognize too that I'm more of a straight presenting, more or less. Like, that could be the assumption that is made, and I know that is the assumption that has been made. But one, it was, not feeling safe to be out because either certain comments were made in front of me. Like, I remember being in staff meetings and people would be like, "Oh, there they go again," kind of like we get it. Bring in the LGBTQ people, or like, "Oh, it's too many queer people," or X, Y, and Z, right? So again, not feeling that comfortable. But then once I did, it was back in 2019. I went through intense trauma therapy, and still in therapy now. But to recognize that I need to fully live my authentic self, or I'm just gonna be this angry person. Because at the time I was in a more managerial position. And I noticed I was not the leader or manager I wanted to be, particularly in the Latino space. And it wasn't until I did therapy and I recognized that, I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm living this lie." And you start again exhibiting or just being this person that you're not. And then once I did, I mean, now I'm on my dream job. I've been at LinkedIn for 11 months now, and LinkedIn was my just dream since, what was it, we came on we were founded in 2003. I was on the platform probably by 2010, 2011. And ever since then, I had applied and I recognize now, being in this, I was like, "Oh, there was no way I could have been here 5 years ago." Just in terms of the culture and just everyone is so accepting. I love working at LinkedIn. I've never felt so safe to be out and so proud about it. I kid you not, throughout my journey, I actually had been so vocal once I kind of went through therapy again back in 2019, did all of that, and then moved to Chicago. I've been here for 3 years now. I I just act differently. I interact with individuals differently. I was one of the few, and I note this because I remember a manager asked me about it. I actually put Latina or Mexican American queer identifying on my cover letter. I wanted them to know who they were going to get. And it wasn't until after I got hired, this one particular manager, she was like, "We've always been curious, why you added that on there. I never, and she was a little bit older. She's like, "I'm from the generation where we just do not talk about that. So for you to be so open, honestly," she's like, "I second guessed myself. I didn't know, who I wanted, part of my team. But then I recognized that you wrote that on there because you wanted to know, I'm not the one." And that's what you were thinking. So again, it's been a journey. Therapy has helped a lot, but I've recognized I show up as a completely different person ever since I've been out, and very proud about it. You'll see it on my LinkedIn. It says queer Mexican American woman. You'll see it everywhere. That's pretty much all I talk about. Yeah, hashtag, right? But yeah, that's been my journey, and I've been very blessed to, have a family that is supportive and a network through, CHCI, or Alumni Association,
Mhm.
that really supported me when I came out on my journey when I was in DC.
Well, gracias. And, we're so proud of you and blessed to have you here and have you working in LinkedIn, right? Representing our community and shouting out, celebrating our voices as you have in your background and being the voice, right? Of mujeres empoderadas, right? And women who are chingonas like you, right? Who get their work done, right? They're badasses. And our Latinas are rock stars. And, I mean, we all have a Latina mother, right? So we know their potential. So I'm glad that you understood what that is, and it gave you that strength, right, to really shine and leverage your entire self and your entire toolkit. So thank you for sharing that, Jasmine. Anthony, tell us about your story. What is
Hi.
it like?
I guess my story is not as exciting, but I guess, growing up, I was raised by a single mother, and I have two brothers and lots of female cousins. So I grew up surrounded by women, basically. So in reality, like I will play with dolls with them because I was the minority, meaning like the only boy within
Right.
our group, and I don't know, like once I started growing up, I realized I like men, but I didn't have. I mean, I was growing up in Dominican Republic, which is different than growing up over here. I'm an immigrant, and I do recall like in the school people like making fun of me because it was obvious that I was gay. I was a little girly, um, but that used to bother me. And then at some point, people used to tell me like, "Oh, like if you don't say anything or if you don't react, they stop because what they want to do is sort of, you know, get you on." So I
Mhm.
started doing that, and once I started ignoring people, people just stopped because they didn't get the reaction that they wanted to get. So growing up when I was older, I didn't really have to come out because it was kind of obvious, right? I did come out to my
Mhm.
father, which the reaction was pretty unexpectedly accepting. He accepted it like it was nothing. My mom, like mothers, she still I think has a problem with it, which she will never say. um, I remember like I had some cousins back then that they were used to always like be rumors because it was obvious that I was gay, but I will never say I'm gay. Um, and then at some point when I just tell them, hey, this is what I am. This is who I am. Either you take it or leave it. My life is not gonna end because I'm gay, right? So after I say that, I just stop. Like I think it was a normal thing for me. Um, my family was not a traditional family, as I mentioned. I grew up with a single mom. Um, I remember at one point my dad told me something that surprised me. So there was a point in time when I was going to Italy a lot. And one day I was in Italy and he calls me and I'm, hey, dad, I'm in Italy. And he say, hey, you go to Italy so much. Why don't you find a man and get married and stay there? And when he told me that, I was like, oh my God, he just told me to get married to a man. So, I think I was lucky that I have a very accepting, family. I didn't have to have the traumatic or crazy coming out situation. When it comes to work, I can say I have never been discriminated for either being a Latino or an immigrant or having an accent or being gay. Actually, in the company I work for, I'm proud to say that there is very extensive representation for the LGBT community at all levels of the organization, including in the managing committee level. We have top executives that are actually gay, and so you see people like I see people like me all over in the company in different areas. So that's good. Um, in terms of like when I was younger, yeah, it impacted me because we was during the time where it was less accepting. I think now when I go back to the Dominican Republic, people are more open and they are not as mean as they used to be in the past. So I can say that our community, like at least our community is now being more accepted back where I am from. It went from people like sort of shouting at me stuff to saying something like "God bless you" or "Hey, you're beautiful," whatever. Like it's just very weird. But it's totally different than the experience I had when I was younger, right? And I think it all has to do because I always knew I was like that, and those were the things I liked, and I never tried to hide it. And maybe that's why it was not an obvious coming out because I never hide it. I play with my cousins. I remember like sewing like little clothes for the Barbies and doing all the different things that they were doing because I was always playing with the girls. And even like at school, my best friends were girls, and my best neighbors were girls, and And I remember I used to have these two friends that my childhood friend that we always used to walk to school together. And in Dominican Republic, the way school works is that you're there in the morning shift or the afternoon shift. So there was one time that we ended up being on different shifts, and then I was in the afternoon shift, and I was feeling so lonely because I didn't have my friends. And at some point, I was crying like on the classroom, and the professor came over, like the teacher, like, "What's going on?" And say, "Oh, I miss my friends. He thought I was hungry." And then eventually, I got away with being shift to the morning shift, right? Because I felt like I was alone because I didn't have my friends, which were two girls, right? So it was obvious, right, from very young age that I was gay. So it was different for me, I guess, because I recognized who I was and I embraced it instead of trying to hide it and act differently. I just took it as it was and just had fun with it, right? And it was a good experience overall. Thank you.
Thank you. No, and that's definitely very exciting. There's really no competition, right, about like how you identify and where you start. But I love the fact that, and shout out to single moms who raised you, right? Or maybe a sibling who raised you, or an aunt or a grandpa, or another relative, or even a friend of a family. We all have a story, right? Like for me, I grew up in Juarez, next to El Paso, Texas. I'm also of Mexican descent, so I grew up in an area where contrast was ever present, where there were two nations, two languages, two cultures. So really navigating that was very complex and interesting. And like you, Anthony, I knew that I was not different. I knew that I was unique, and that I was actually that uniqueness made me better. I actually used it to empower myself, and I would do that throughout my entire, high school immigrant journey. Shout out to immigrants as well, you know, and because it's definitely hard, right, when you have to adjust to different identities. And by the way, we all didn't touch on this, but sometimes these identities are like put on us, right? Like we don't necessarily identify as XYZ, right? And they're like, oh, now, like I know when I came to the US, it's like, okay, well, now you're brown, or you're this, or you're minority, or you're whatever. Like where I came from, we're the majority. Like everybody looks like me, the judges, the person at the TSA at the airport, like the housekeeper, they all look Mexican, where I come from. So it's not really that idea of minorityness, quote unquote. That's something that I didn't grow up with. I didn't grow up with that imposter syndrome of our people being less than or incapable of doing XYZ. All my teachers were people of color, women, right? Like Jasmine, right? So I think I knew the genius that exists in our community. And for me, to you guys, really, and ladies, right? We really identified, I think all of us, that it was our strength, right? That it was a special light that we had. So I think we all had that in common. And speaking of that, how are you shining that light in your workplace? Like, tell us about a moment of pride that you have, maybe where you have either opened the door or had a door open for you because of the fact that you are so authentic and sort of, living in your truth at work.
I can kick us off. I mean, I made it my profession, right? I made it my work, my life's work to do diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't take for granted any of the opportunities that I have to be invited. I also, given the nature of who I am and how I am, have come to also feel very comfortable inviting myself to conversations, and opening the door for others to also join. I I I often remind folks that my superpower is to be Latino and to be gay and to be now a parent and to be, so it's like all of, just like the beyond pride intersectionality, like, I'm like, hey, you want to go to a focus group? That's gonna be a lot of fun. It's gonna take you a long time, but you could also ask me. And I think, I've figured out a way to take all of who I am and what I am and provide perspective. The other way that I feel like it has been very important for me is to give folks an understanding of just even the privilege that I have as being a male, cisgender male, like the experience for trans for trans folks who are Latinos are not necessarily the same way as mine. I mean, Anthony talked about there being more acceptance. And I agree with you. I think to an extent, like, when I go to Puerto Rico, people are like, oh my gosh, we love you. We love your family, but I have a different level of privilege and sort of cultural acceptance than, say, someone who is trans in Puerto Rico, who is still dealing with a lot of those, someone mentioned in one of the questions, the machismo culture, and just all that comes, about, as a result of that. And so it's funny. I feel like people probably have a harder time, like, figuring out how I can not shine so damn brightly, because I think it's just innate to me and who I am that, like, I will always shine my light wherever I go. And I think I love the fact that I can advocate for my Latinos, and I love the fact that I can also, by the way, who are not a monolith and are very and have very different thoughts and perspectives. Not all Mexicans are the same, not all Puerto Ricans are the same, not the entire Latino Hispanic community is not the same either. But just to simply, I'll say this: I never take for granted having a seat at the table. And again, I have no problems at all whatsoever pulling up a chair and making a space for not just myself, but others as well. One of the things that I talk about in this DEI work is that people tend to feel, even within our own communities, we tend to feel that there's sort of this game of musical chairs, and so if you're there, then that means I can't be there, and I try to dispel that as often as possible. And I say to people, if you've got a pie, like, if you got a pie that's one size, yeah, eventually you're going to run out of slices. But who's to say that we can't make a bigger pie so that more people can eat? And I think of the same way when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is not a game of musical chairs. This is truly, the idea is that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so that is truly how I use my my superpower. And it's funny because it comes innately. I don't even think about it, and that means that's when you know that it's authentic and real and heartfelt. And so yeah, that would be my response.
Yeah, well, we definitely received that and appreciate you, as you said, pulling up a chair, right? I always say, like, when I join a table, I'm kind of like you. I have the same philosophy. I don't just want to sit at the table. I want to change the entire seating arrangement. So if you were sitting over there, now you're sitting over here next to somebody new. So you can also have a different perspective of the table itself and who's there. So, it's, again, I think as a community, to your point, need to not just occupy space, but we need to fill space, and we need to actually invite space, like create space for other people, get another chair in there, or maybe get, another little chair, right, for a younger person or an older person. So speaking of that, Jasmine, I'd like to pivot over to you. And don't worry, Anthony, I haven't forgotten about you. Jasmine, what's your experience as a woman in tech, and now sort of, I mean, I'm in that space. It's sort of very, it could be described as monolithic, Carlos, to a certain degree, especially at the leadership level and at the founders level and at the investment level, So Jasmine, how does that, uniqueness that you have show up and empower you at work?
Yeah, I think that there's so many different ways that this could be answered. Just because, I mean, I think I could speak still to my previous experience, because LinkedIn is so unique. Like, I just have to say that it's so unique in the way, I mean, one, like you say, just there's a lot of pay transparency in terms of work. So that conversation from day one has always been super transparent, to make sure there's equitable practices right across the line. There's also another way of just this sense of belonging at an organization too, right? To be able to shine bright and highlight yourself and be yourself. And that's through multiple levels. I actually have a leadership position with our Latinx ERG at LinkedIn, Ola. and I manage our global partnerships. And that in and of itself, like I knew that I wanted to have a leadership position. I mean, so early in my career at LinkedIn, because I wanted to be part of the conversation, but not just part of the conversation, influencing what that kind of culture looks like within, such a large company. And so, but I felt welcome, to do that, either through my manager or through colleagues that I met in the Chicago office. So it's just, I've been blessed in that respect in this role to feel so welcome to be myself, right? Whereas in other roles, I think that and organizations, there was just a lot of difficult conversations that needed to be had that weren't had, right? And I could see that me living authentically myself, to kind of one of your earlier questions,
Yep.
was that it like allowed others, like they were seeing more or less like how successful I was being, whether it was in my direct role or just like in leadership positions that I was having. And they're like, man, like, what would that look like for myself? And even engaging in that conversation with me of like, well, like, how are you so confident? They would ask me too, right? I get that question a lot, actually. And I'm like, you know what? Well, one, like, I have to give credit to my mom, like, without a doubt, like every single day of my life, the way she raised me, of just like, she's like, you don't know anyone anything. And if you ever feel for a second that you're not being respected or valued for your worth, she's like, you leave. And I have, like, I'm notorious for like, if this is not working out for me, bye. Like, I don't need to be here. I can find somewhere else. And I recognize too, it's very difficult that, there are other individuals part of our, community that don't, like, they just can't say that. They can't act that way because we don't look the same way, right? Like, there's still a lot of prejudice that exists very much. But again, and I recognize that too, which is why I think it's more important for me to be vocal, because even I recognize that I have a seat of privilege, like I alluded to earlier, right? That I know that when I walk into spaces, unless I'm walking with my partner or I'm like, again, wearing something as a happy pride or something, like the assumption is going to be made that I'm a straight, woman in this space. But that even more so, again, why I have to be vocal about, being proud to be queer or X, Y, and Z. So yeah, I think one, it's like I said, it's impacted how others like start kind of introspection within themselves of like, how can I, exhibit my full authentic self in the workplace? And especially in those workplaces that I was in that weren't necessarily, again, they just haven't had the difficult conversations to kind of get to that level, to make it a safe space, for myself or for others. But then even my current workplace now, like having that, it's an example for other individuals on how, they can be and be okay in their space. And then, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, thank you for doing that, because to your point, sometimes we take it for granted, right? Like the visibility that we bring to the table, people are looking for that. They actually are thirsty of that. They, wouldn't make assumptions about our parents wouldn't be afraid for us if they saw us. If they saw us as like the common sort of denominator of success, they would be okay with us being gay, or LGBT, or anything else, right? Or even not being a person of, the community, but who maybe acts a certain way or dresses a certain way or identifies differently, right? So I think, that visibility, don't definitely take it for granted. And you are doing a lot. And as a woman of color, even if you're walking in and people assume that you're not, queer, you still are walking in as you. And I think that makes it important and impactful for young girls, right? And tech, I know I have a hard time recruiting women, right, into my company because there's not a pipeline. But I also think it's not a pipeline problem. It's a structural problem, right, of really defining success. And you are that. So don't take that for granted. And I'm glad that we're giving you a platform today.
Even in that respect, sorry, AJ, don't mean to cut you off, but I think, like, I also fully recognize
That's a very Latino thing, by the way. All of you are allowed to interrupt.
I'm like, I fully recognize, kid you not, the position that I am now. Like, it was a Latino who interviewed me. Like, a Latino who introduced me to, like, who ended up being the hiring manager, kept the conversation going. And then he, like, went above and beyond. And then I also say he because I've been in so many different positions where it's been men that have gone out of their way to make sure to advocate for me. And so in my specific position now, like, it was a Latino male, like, very dedicated to our Latino community, to literally his mission is to get more Latinos at LinkedIn. And he stayed true by it. He's like, I'm in a seat of position of power now. Let me use this, seat of power to
add more of us here, right? Because he took a chance on me. Like,
Yeah.
my role is sales at LinkedIn. I don't have any sales experience whatsoever.
Mhm.
Like the extent of my sales experience was like at a bookstore when I was in college. But I've been here now and I've like surpassed my quota quarter after quarter, my half, everything. I've been incredibly successful in
Mhm.
my role, but he took that chance, seeing, how I have been successful in other roles. I mean, at the end of the day, it's transferable skills. That's kind of what I always say to individuals. But yeah, that's just to also say again, when you have a seat of position of power at all of these, organizations, particularly in tech, because we know a lot of tech organizations, they have a lot of work to do to get more women in leadership positions, more queer
Mhm.
women. I'm very proud that we have Rosanna at our organization who led
Mhm.
our diversity initiative. And so that I think has an impact, again, like her as an Afro-Latina woman, queer woman at that helm, kind of making decisions again that trickle down for the rest of the organization and make it so I have the experience that I have had for the past 11 months at LinkedIn.
Yeah, and that's great. And we want to hear more stories like yours, right? Where it is not easy, but it is normal, right? Like it's okay. Like it can be challenging as well, but it's just like not a fear that you have, like you mentioned in your other jobs, where maybe it wasn't safe, right? And I'm glad that you have allies who are from the communities that you have an affinity to, who have empowered you, and that you're actually paying it forward, right? Like today by telling your story. Anthony, how about you? How are you, now sort of evolving, from being the young boy who used to play with his cousins and, be creative. And that's what I pick up from your story, right? That you were creative, that you had good relationship skills, right? You understood that you were different, but didn't let it sort of set you back, right? Your career has been pretty impressive in the business sector. What how have you managed to sort of navigate it, or bring that personality to your work?
Oh, thank you for the question. Yes, so I think, what I tend to do is I always try to look at what skills are transferable and sort of become better at them. Since I grew up having good relationship with my family and friends, particularly, right? Because you can choose your friends but not your family. I have this really good like relationship management skills, and I'm able to easily partner with other people across other teams, and in large corporate organizations like State Street. I most of my career had roles that are global, which means I have to interact with different people across the different regions that we operate. So having the skill to really function properly across different teams, being able to drive results without directly managing the people, is something that since I was very young, I always been like the leader. So whenever in school there was a group project, I'm the one always taking the leadership and like driving everything. So I grew up with the driver's seat to a extent where now I am the chair of our Latino network at
Mm,
State Street. And before then, I was the chair of one of the committees, and it's all about mobilizing people and influencing people to do the things that you want to do, so communicating the right vision. So I think my superpower is really to influence people, right? And
mm,
I'm not an influencer on Instagram or anything like that, right? But in my company, I believe I am some sort of influencer because I have this ability to really like drive results and get people to do what's best for the organization without being their manager or being someone superior to them. So I think Stage 3 is kind of easy to I guess Boston particularly, right? Because it's a larger office, but it's easy to grow and develop if you are able to build those good relationship skills and are able to keep that connection from the very beginning. So my very first role at Stage 3, I still have the relationships and I still know the people. If I ever need anything from them, it takes me a little chat or an email, and they will go out of their way to help me if they can, right? If they're not breaking a rule or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is that I always try every role I had not to burn the bridge, to keep it friendly, to accommodate, to ensure it's a smooth transition. But then, the thing is that we live in a fast growing and changing world, especially in business. And I work in technology now, in investment technology. And the idea is that you want to make sure that you're always thinking like at a very high level and not getting lost in the details. And that's something that I'm very good at also, is like always looking at things at the high level. because I grew up knowing that I was unique, I'm gonna call you now, AJ, was I
Mhm.
was unique. I always try. I grew up being very optimistic and always looking at the positive side of things. And I
Mm.
can give you a practical example about what happened yesterday on Sunday. So on Sunday, I was coming back from Italy. I was supposed to fly with Airways. They canceled one of my flights and they rebooked me into an Air Canada flight. Because the Air Canada flight was leaving out of Milan to go to Montreal, I was able to buy some duty free items that I been wanting to buy. So instead of like me getting mad about like my itinerary being changed and not being able to get home on time, I took advantage of it and went shopping, and sort of like look at the positive side of things. Like if I were to travel from Milan to Zurich, I would have not been able to do the duty free shopping for the bag that I wanted. I'm on blank, so like I always try to find the positive side of everything, and that's something that has been a key skill in my role. Is always try when we're faced with an issue, try to see what's positive about it or what can be done quickly to solve the issue. So
Yeah,
that's all I have. Thank you.
that makes sense. I want to see that bag that you buy because it's probably fierce. I, you know, want to take a little pause to just underline what all of you have said, and really find the fact that if we had like a word map, right? Like I'm an educator, right? I come back from education. So just hear all the words that you all said, right? Like really the idea of leadership, influence, right? Being optimistic, finding your a seat at the table, right, Carlos, and understanding how to work in partnership, Jasmine, and understanding allies and allyship, right? So, I think all of us, like who we were as children and who we were as young kids and young people and now older, right, and professionals, both professionally and personally, really, we are the same. We have the same essence, right? And that sort of intersection that you talk about, Carlos, is what makes us super, powerful, right? And I think I believe that our community, to your point about the diasporic aspect of it and the diversity of it, it has a lot of power, right? We're multicultural but multinational. Anthony, you are global, right? Like your descendants, like we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Think about it. Like, when the Mayans were thinking about, they didn't imagine Jasmine was going to work empowering global people to understand, right, what their identity is and the data that LinkedIn has and the influence. So we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, and I think we all need to really own that today, and own that all the time. So to your point, Anthony, about being optimistic, right? Like I know we have about 15 minutes or so. There's a couple questions from the audience. I'm gonna try to like merge them together here. So who do you rely on to like keep you strong, to sort of, what is that community that sort of is your support, right? Outside of work, or it could be within work as well. Who are you sort of, who's your ride or die, so to speak, when you do have a harder time with being who you are. Tell us about that.
All
What is
right.
your, and how does your work sort of maybe create a welcoming space if they do?
True. So this is interesting. So because I was the chair of the employee network, the committee particularly, my co-chair, who's now the chair of the committee I was leading, she's from Chile. Her name is Loreto. She is a person that I always talk to her a lot and ask for feedback and advice, and we sort of coach each other, right, in certain aspects of life. But I would say she once told me something that she read on an article, and what she said was that we are the average of the five people that we frequent the most. And when she told me that, I started analyzing my very close circle. And I can say that I have a selective number of people at work that I always go to for advice when I have challenges. And I also have similar people in for the personal life as well. I will say that I have Stage 3, I have my mentor who is my strongest ally and is a white female, and she is amazing. She's been with me when I was going through a very difficult time and on a prior role that I had before where I am now. And she's sort of like the person, my go-to person whenever I have any sort of issue. And she tried either to calm me down, to provide me some advice, to get some contact and connect me with someone that can help me. That like on the personal space, I think what makes it a welcoming environment is that at State Street, our senior leaders and executive leaders are very welcoming as a whole. So in the leadership position that I have as an employee network leader, whenever I want to do an executive panel and I reach out to any of the executives, they're always open and happy to come and speak and be an ally to the Latino network, the LAPG, which is Latin American Professional Group, which is a network that I normally represent. I don't have a lot of involvement with our State Street Pride and friends because I feel that they are a larger group and the Latino community is way smaller. So I've been focusing all my time on the Latino community because we're smaller in force and in representation in the company, and I think that's where I can have more impact. Um, so basically what I can say that all our executives, because, this kind of companies top down, right? So if the people at the top are very welcoming and opening, the people that are below are going to follow this and display the same. And, I can say I'm very proud of working in this company that I am now, and everyone, many different levels on top of me are very opening and very welcoming. And I think that one makes people feel welcome, right? But the other thing as well is like if you don't ask, you never know, right? So if you join the company and you're going to start interacting and trying to network with some of these people, you will know that they're that friendly and welcoming, right? And I think that's important. And because of the whole LGBTQ plus sometimes more often it seems that is something that is part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. But in reality, it's more than that. It's something that needs to be organic within the organization. I know that most of their initiatives are driven by the diversity and inclusion team because you need to have someone like Carlos, for example, in his company that is running those programs and working with the different businesses to make sure things are going the right way. But at the end of the day, I think, each individual business within a corporation has to do their part in supporting and creating a welcoming environment, especially when you're a global company with so many employees all over the world.
Of course. Yeah.
But at Stage 3, I can say that we've done a great job at making it feel a welcoming environment. We have all letters represented. I've seen transgender people at work actually, which is interesting. Yeah, like I've seen some people on my company that are transgender and they work normal, like a normal person doing a normal job, right? So we make the space for them. We create the space for them, and we don't treat them any differently because we accept them the way they are, including myself. They accept me the way I am, right? So I don't get any special treatment for being an intersection, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And to that point, I know that we have about 10 minutes, so I just want to get Carlos and Jasmine's perspective on either like what you rely on in terms of your support, or maybe like current challenges. I see a question coming in from LinkedIn, Jasmine, going your way. Uh, what is some challenges? Like obviously, all of you are super accomplished. Thank God, or the universe, or whatever you believe in or not believe in, that you all know yourselves, right? But what about some challenges, Jasmine, that you're facing now and that you would like to overcome? And Carlos, we'll close out. We'll give you the last word on that one.
Yeah, I think challenges for me personally have been, I alluded earlier, this is a brand new like industry, right? Nonprofit, government, and now corporate. And then my actual day-to-day role, I'm in sales. I've never been in sales before. Quota carrying role on top of that. So I think that's been the biggest challenge and adjustment for me. It's I'm learning quite literally a new skill. And I'm very grateful though, because we had about like almost 5 months of training at LinkedIn before I actually got into my role. But even then, right, like there's a lot going on in just we talked about the great reshuffle, just the market, business. There's a lot going on there. So you can forecast all you want, but there's a lot of things going on in the world that change that, right? So it's just learning that. Like I kid you not, almost every other day I feel like I'm taking a business course when I'm having a conversation either with my manager or with my mentor, my sales coaches here at LinkedIn. And so that's just a very specific challenge for me. And then even more so too, like as many of you probably have seen right through my LinkedIn, like I was the vice president of the Alumni Association with CHCI, and I was the co-chair for Chicago Women in Philanthropy. Like I'm no stranger to leadership positions, but I think that leadership positions, especially at a global like scale for corporate, are very different too. So what does it mean, right, to hold influence? What does it mean to completely transform? Again, like a sense of belonging and leadership opportunities. Again, when you like, we also work at an organization that provides so many different, professional development opportunities. So it's understanding that like at a more global scale, and even for myself, because I am an aspiring executive, like I want to be, that queer Latina woman that is at C-suite level at a tech company, right? But what does that look like after only being there 11 months in, right? So it's really, again, getting a handle of like my current role, and then also understanding like my day-to-day role, my 9 to 5 more or less, right? And then the volunteer positions that I hold that aren't necessarily volunteer, because it's just for us. I think, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I do get a sense that BIPOC individuals that volunteer for these positions, right? Like it's not volunteer, because it means much more to us to have that kind of sense of belonging. Like we care about what you spend over 80% of your life at work. You care about what that experience is like. So it's not like you can just, if something bad happens, you don't just go to sleep and like, oh, whatever, it happened at work. Like, no, that follows you, right? So it's a different type of like being able to balance your energies and so on and so forth. I think is something else that I've been trying to learn to manage. And then too, recognizing that like, it's not all on one person, right? I think that's something else that I try to be very vocal about. Like, what's going to happen when like you're not there? You want to leave something that's sustainable, like uplift others, make sure. I constantly still day in and day out have conversations with individuals who want to get into CHCI or just other programs, like I said, has that leadership program, right? Because like I didn't have that when I was growing up. I no way did my family come with connections, that I have any connections. Like that's why too I'm such a big fan of LinkedIn, and I'm so happy to work here now, because LinkedIn really did connect me to economic opportunity. It helped me nurture and build that network on a platform online, right? So it's just, again, I think that's kind of the challenges again that I have, how I'm kind of working through them, and thankfully have a very, to one of your earlier questions in terms of like support system, it's either through my partner, through my friends that I have day in and day conversations. Because going back to just like recognizing my privilege, right? My partner is more masculine presenting, so she has more just different experiences in the workplace than I do, that I'm never going to experience, right? And then there is at work, right? Like I am so happy, like for the first time, have a manager where I can day in and day out during our check-in, our weekly check-in, have conversations very, raw about, hey, I experienced this, or this comment was made. What do you think about that? And she's very receptive to it too, right? So it's through that, or even we had our team is all fairly new, and we had kind of like a dibs journey conversation where all of us presented about ourselves and like our lives to get to know each other a little bit more. And I think that was very impactful, because we all know each other a little bit more now outside of like what we do in our jobs, right? And then even just to show you how like at LinkedIn it goes through scales, right? Like that's directly with my team. Then as a department, we have those conversations on a monthly basis. And then even like as a global company, we also monthly have those conversations. So there's always at every single level at LinkedIn that we're experiencing some kind of support.
Yeah, and I can pick up on your excitement, right? About, like you said, your dream job. And shout out to State Street, right? You guys are great ambassadors. I'm sure that your C-suite executives or, folks that you work with will be very proud to see you both representing their companies. And that question came from LinkedIn. So shout out to LinkedIn there. Carlos, close us out with the optimistic lens, the advice maybe. I feel free to put everything in, and give us your 2 cents at the end here.
Well, first and foremost, if any of the panelists and moderator are in Chicago, we need to get together and grab some lunch and some cocktails on me.
All right. Dude, somebody put it in the chat.
Yeah. I think this is recorded, so okay. I have to live up to it now. So, and I just want to say I'm so incredibly impressed by the work that you've done, AJ, Jasmine, Anthony. Couldn't be happier to be on this panel with all of you. A challenge for me is always not to feel like I have to take on the world by myself, and to just recognize sometimes that, and at the same time recognize sometimes that change and influence and impact can come in a number of packages, right? And so it could be one person, and you just don't know what that impact is for that one individual. I mean, I think about what Jasmine just mentioned right now in terms of her own story, and how someone had to, like, be brave enough to be an advocate and to open up those doors and those spaces. And there's always something I think we can do to sort of pay it forward. But I am a little hard on myself sometimes, where I feel like I have to, and you just can't, you physically can't. And one of the things I tell my team all the time is that you can't pour out of an empty cup. And I think we tend to feel like everything we do is so important, that it has to command your time, your energy, your focus, sort of in that moment. And I think just naturally, most of us, it's a Latino thing too. I tell my friends all the time, if you go to Puerto Rico and you find yourself a good Puerto Rican, and they will literally adopt you into their family. Like, we will just, we just do that. That's what we do. And I say it because it's a Latino thing. But we tend to feel this, like, sort of sense of responsibility for others, and I think that's important for it to be a driver, but it can't be sort of your sole sort of area. Lately for me, I think just being a new parent, it's being present, I think, has been a challenge, and I think being present as both a partner and being present as a parent, I think is already commanding a lot of attention, and it's in addition to what you've got to do at work. And so no one at my work is telling me I need to be here at this time, so on and so forth, which I think is one of the great things that has come from if anything, I mean, from this shift and transition to a more sort of hybrid workplace. But I think when I take a moment to analyze and sit with my own thoughts and feelings about where I've come from, where I am, and how I've helped others along the way, it's a beautiful moment, and I feel like the more I do that, the more it gives me energy to want to do that. And I think creating safe spaces starts with just even acknowledging the allies around you, and the impact of their work, and which is why I love what Jasmine said. And I think if we all do that, even just a little bit more, we will create more opportunities for people to express the type of bravery and the allyship and the sponsorship that we need, and that others need, for us to continue to just keep it going. But this is our superpower, and we just gotta love it and show it.
You gotta leverage it. Well, speaking of allies, and I think what everything you said, ditto, snaps, Carlos, and all of you, really so proud of all of you, and we will hold you to that dinner, and we cannot wait for it. In fact, in the summer in Chicago, so why not? Rooftop. And speaking of allies, and by the way, shout out to all the allies who were here today, and want to bring back Alberto to close us out. And of course, thank all of you as well for just sharing your stories with us today. Alberto, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Carlos, Jasmine, and Anthony, for fostering an illuminating discussion on intersectionality and belonging, calling attention to the importance of not just being at the table, I love that, but rearranging the seats at the table so that we can all shine in our unique light and collectively make our ancestors proud as we lift one another in pride. I have a lot of orgullo as a fellow ally with my fellow hermanos, hermanas. I'm very proud to be in support with you, to be in alignment with you. Once more, thank you to our sponsors, PepsiCo and Target. And lastly, as a reminder, HACER is a leadership development organization. We develop leaders for the future. On that note, as a reminder, symposium takes place September 26th through the 28th at the Intercontinental in Los Angeles, downtown. Symposium, if you're not aware with this platform, is it brings together the nation's most influential Hispanic leaders and Fortune 500 leaders committed to advancing Hispanic inclusion in the areas of employment, procurement, philanthropy, and governance. We also release the Corporate Inclusion Index, which is a very important report to hold companies accountable. Another touch point throughout the year takes place October 24th through the 26th. That's our Leadership Pipeline Program, which will be taking place at the JW Marriott Marquis in Miami, Florida. And this is a conference for Hispanic mid-level managers who want to position themselves for future executive leadership opportunities. And lastly, because I know that we had a number of HACER, Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers, in the audience, as well as Anthony, fellow alum of the 2022 cohort. And I believe Jasmine Garcia is also interested in potentially the 2023 cohort. The HACER Young Hispanic Corporate Achiever 2023 nomination guide will be active Friday, July 1st. Go to www.hacer.org to learn more. Thank you. And on behalf of HACER, shine your bright light.